Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, the World Economic Forum releases its competitivity report for this year, and African countries have a ways to go. The top ranked is Mauritius at 49, and Chad is right at the bottom at 140. 17 of the bottom 20 nations hail from sub-Saharan Africa. We take a closer look with one of the report's authors. Also, MPs from Algeria's majority parties ramp up calls for Parliament's Speaker to go. This week, around 200 MPs locked down the doors of Parliament to push home their point that Said Bouhadja must quit. And in Nigeria, farmers are turning to a combination of peer-to-peer lending and live-streamed video to raise cash. The crowdfunding model connects beneficiaries with online investors. We take a closer look. But first, the World Economic Forum's released its global competitiveness ranking, and Africa, particularly sub-Saharan Africa, has a lot of room for improvement. There's quite a big spread in placement. The highest ranked African country is Mauritius at 49, followed up by South Africa at 67 and the Seychelles at 74. Right at the bottom is Chad at 140, not far below DR Congo, Burundi, and Angola. Now, the report looked at 98 indicators for competitiveness, including key ones like infrastructure and innovation capability. But factors like transparency, health, and press freedom were also considered. Now, Roberto Cotti is an African specialist for the World Economic Forum. He joins us now with more on the report. Roberto, thanks for speaking to us. Now, what are the biggest factors affecting performance in the region? Is Mauritius doing something specifically right, or are the placement of African countries more about a chance combination of economic factors?
Good evening, everyone. Yes, when we look at the competitiveness performance of Africa overall, sub-Saharan Africa overall, we see that, unfortunately, there is still a lot of room for improvement. We see that as a region altogether, on average, sub-Saharan Africa achieves a score above 50 points to 100 only in five pillars out of 12, and is specifically lags behind when it comes to health condition, ICT adoption, and also human capital. As you said, Mauritius is the highest ranked economy in the region. And the success factor for Mauritius is, first of all, the fact that it performs relatively well across all the 12 pillars on which we measure competitiveness. And in particular, it does well in terms of openness, is the sixth most open country in the world. It's also, it has a strong governance with good quality of institutions. And it also have a strong financial sector.
So what are the areas that Africa should really be focusing on to improve its ranking? And are those areas that could do with improvement much different to those for other regions and are covered by the report?
The new methodology, on top of some of the traditional elements, for example, the health condition, we know that on average the expected life in Africa is much lower than in all other continents. But also on top of this factor, the new methodology unveils the fact that although there has been a big improvement in education attainment, the skills and the human capital attained by African labor force is not up to date, especially when we look at digital skills and creativity, and that these are the factors that are going to be more important in the fourth industrial revolution, and the companies are going to increasingly look for.
It looks like the size of a country's GDP is not a reasonable indicator of its competitiveness, particularly when we're talking about this region. We're looking at some of the continent's biggest economies being pretty low down on the list. Nigeria at 114, Egypt at 94, Angola at 137. Why is there such a disparity between African countries' GDPs and the competitiveness?
When we look at competitiveness, we really mean productivity. And therefore, although market size can play an important role to catalyze and to drive investment, is just one of the 12 factors. So it's not possible to compensate, use large market to compensate lacking infrastructure or lacking financial capabilities or innovation.
And why is competitiveness so important?
As we said, productivity, we measure competitiveness and we think about it as the factors that drive productivity. And productivity, we know it's one of the main factors explaining why some countries are richer than others. And when we look at, when we compare how countries perform, we see that in general there is a good correlation between countries' competitiveness and also other standards of living, such as life expectancy and in some cases also happiness or quality of life in general.
Thanks very much. Roberto Crotti there for us, speaking to us from the World Economic Forum. Now, Algerian deputies are ramping up calls for the House Speaker to quit. Hundreds padlocked Parliament shut earlier this week in protest against Saïd Bouhadja, who they accuse of mismanagement. He's refused to step down despite growing pressure from his own party. Laurent Berstecker has more.
Ramping up the pressure on Saïd Bouhadja. Algerian MPs used heavy chains and padlocks to block the entrance to the country's parliament on Tuesday in an act of protest against the House Speaker.
We're here in front of Parliament to express our absolute refusal to work while Saïd Bouhadja is House Speaker.
Saïd Bouhadja is accused by his detractors of mismanagement, illicit expenses, and dubious recruitment. The crisis began last month when the 80-year-old decided to fire the Parliament's Secretary General Bashir Slimani, a move which sparked anger in Bouhadja's own FLN party. Around 200 MPs, including members of Prime Minister Ahmed Ouyahya's RDN party, have since been asking for Bouhadja's resignation, but the request has no legal basis, as Algeria's laws and constitution do not include any procedures to forcibly remove a parliament speaker. Several opposition groups say this is an attempt by the country's two largest parties to bypass state institutions.
We don't support Mr. Bouhadja. We had our own candidate run against him. But he has a 5-year mandate, and he cannot be removed if he refuses to leave.
Saïd Bouhadja has denounced a political maneuver to evict him and says he will stay on unless President Abdelaziz Bouteflika himself asks him to step down. The feud has exposed a deep fracture at the highest level of Algeria's ruling party, less than 6 months before an upcoming presidential election.
Now, women's rights activists have welcomed a sweeping cabinet reshuffle in Ethiopia, which saw half the posts handed to women. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed also created a Ministry of Peace in Tuesday's All Change. He's turned the region's politics on its head with a string of drastic reforms since his appointment in April. His overhaul of government ministries cut back 28 posts to just 20 and appointed women to key portfolios like defence, peace and trade and industry. Abiy's dramatic push for gender parity in positions of power is being taken seriously, but rights campaigners in the country say that he's got to keep up the momentum.
It takes some level of commitment and the serious decision-making for someone to say, I'm not only going to reduce the ministerial positions from 28 to 20, but also I'm going to make sure that 10 of those are women. But if you want new blood and new people joining in, new women joining from different lower levels of government as well, you need to make sure that this is a long-standing policy. It has to be more than just the opinion and the determination of one person or the PM alone. Women's political participation, to me as well, is beyond cabinet positions. It's participation at all levels and the participation of women who have never been in politics before. Women as voters, women as candidates, women as members of civil society and opinion makers, women in media. All of this works towards meaningful women's political participation.
In Nigeria, farmers are turning to a combination of peer-to-peer lending and live-streamed video to raise cash. The crowdfunding model connects beneficiaries with online investors. Nicholas Chemin has more.
Most of Nigeria's farmers live on less than $2 a day.
But thanks to innovative technologies, some of them have found a new access to funding. Companies located in big cities like Lagos and Abuja enable investors to choose a farm on their website. Then they decide how much they want to invest, and later they will receive some of the profit after the harvest. One of the beneficiaries is this poultry farmer in Ogun State. 2 years ago, he produced 3,000 chicks. Now, with the new funds, that figure has risen to 20,000.
We agreed to partner with a company because we did not have enough money to continue with the farm. They helped us, and now we are doing well.
Investors are kept updated on the progress of crops, the same way that contributors to a crowdfunding campaign are kept informed of their projects.
Who have cultivated over 8,000 acres of farmland and close to 600,000 chickens we've been able to raise till date. We're currently a team of 7 that are championing this new course of farming without actually being on a farm.
This company said it helped 7,000 small-scale farmers receive a total of $6 million since it launched the project 2 years ago.
That's it for FLN Africa. Thanks for joining us. Do so again. Take care.